All right. Good morning, guys. How's it going? Welcome to week number 6, the final week of the school year academically. This is lesson number 11 for J.M. Barrie's Peter Pan. If you remember last time, we finished chapter 10, The Happy Home. We're going to bolster right forward with chapter 11. And the homework assignment this week is going to be kind of unique, so I'll talk to you guys about that once we get to the end of the video. And I really want to make the best economic use of our time, so I'm going to jump right in. Remember, click the link in the video description below to follow along with today's reading. It'll pull up a copy of Peter Pan for free right in your web browser, and you can read along, or you can read afterwards per the homework. And without further ado, let's start on chapter 11, Wendy's story. "Listen then," said Wendy, settling down to her story with Michael at her feet and 7 boys in the bed. "There was once a gentleman." "I had rather he had been a lady," Curly said. "I wish he had been a white rat," said Nibs. "Quiet," their mother admonished them. "There was a lady also, and—" "Oh, Mummy," cried the first twin, "you mean that there is a lady also, don't you? She's not dead, is she?" "Oh, no. I'm awfully glad she isn't dead," said Toodles. "Are you glad, John?" "Of course I am. Are you glad, Nibs?" "Rather. Are you glad, twins?" "We are glad." "Oh, dear," sighed Wendy. "Little less noise there," Peter called out, determined that she should have fair play, however beastly a story it might be in his opinion. "The gentleman's name," Wendy continued, "was Mr. Darling. The lady's name was Mrs. Darling." "I knew them," John said to annoy the others. "I think I knew them," said Michael rather doubtfully. "They were married, you know," explained Wendy, "and what do you think they had?" "White rats," cried Nibs, inspired. "No." "It's awfully puzzling," said Toodles, who knew the story by heart. "Quiet, Toodles. They had 3 descendants." "What is descendants?" "Well, you are one, twin." "Do you hear that, John? I'm a descendant." "Descendants are only children," said John. Oh dear, sighed Wendy. "Now these children had a faithful nurse called Nana, but Mr. Darling was angry with her and chained her up in the yard, and so all the children flew away." You guys remember this story, right? "It's an awfully good story," said Nibs. "They flew away," Wendy continued, "to the Neverland, where the lost children are." "I just thought they did," Curly broke in excitedly. "I don't know how it is, but I just thought they did." "Oh, Wendy," cried Toodles, "was one of the lost children called Toodles?" "Yes, he was." "I'm in a story! Hurrah! I'm in a story, Nibs!" "Hush. Now I want you to consider the feeling of the unhappy parents with all their children flown away." "Oh," they all moaned, though they were not really considering the feelings of the unhappy parents one's job. "Think of the empty beds." "Oh." "It's awfully sad," the first twin said cheerfully. "I don't see how you can have a happy ending," said the second twin. "Do you, Nibs?" "I'm frightfully anxious." "If you knew how great is a mother's love," Wendy told them triumphantly, "you would have no fear." She had now come to the part that Peter hated. "I do like a mother's love," said Toodles, hitting Nibs with a pillow. "Do you like a mother's love, Nibs?" "I do just," said Nibs, hitting back. "You see," Wendy said complacently, "our heroine knew that the mother would always leave the window open for her children to fly back. So they stayed away for years and years and just had a lovely time in the Neverland." "Did they ever go back?" "Let us now," said Wendy, bracing herself up for her finest effort, "take a peep into the future." And they all gave themselves the twist that makes peeps into the future easier. "Years have rolled by, and who is this elegant lady of uncertain age alighting at London Station?" "Oh, Wendy, who is she?" cried Nibs, every bit as excited as if he didn't know. "Can it be? Yes. No. It is! The fair Wendy." "Oh, and who are the 2 nobly portly figures accompanying her, now grown to man's estate? Can they be John and Michael?" "They are." "Oh! See, dear brothers," says Wendy, pointing upwards, "there is the window still standing open. Ah, now we are rewarded for our sublime faith in a mother's love." So up they flew to their mummy and daddy, and pen cannot describe the happy scene over which we drew a vow. That was the story, and they were as pleased with it as the fair narrator herself. Everything just as it should be, you see. Off we skip like the most heartless things into the world, which is what children are, but so attractive, and we have an entirely selfish time, and then when we have need of special attention, we nobly return for it, confident that we should be rewarded instead of smacked. So great indeed was their faith in the mother's love that they felt they could afford to be callous for a bit longer in the Neverland. But there was one who knew better, and when Wendy finished, he uttered a hollow groan. Who do you guys think that is that's uttering the groan? What is it, Peter? She cried, running to him, thinking he was ill. She felt him solicitously lower down than his chest. Where is it, Peter? It isn't that kind of pain, Peter replied darkly. Then what kind is it? Wendy, you are wrong about mothers. They all gathered around him in a fright, so alarming was his agitation, and with a fine candor he told them what he had hitherto concealed. Long ago, he said, I thought like you, that my mother would always keep the window open for me. So I stayed away for moons and moons and moons, and then I flew back. But the window was barred, for Mother had forgotten all about me, and there was another little boy sleeping in my bed. I am not sure that this was true, but Peter thought it was true, and it scared them. So J.M. Barrie here being ambiguous with the, the lore of Peter's past, right? Peter's lore. So two words there that are vocab words. One is ambiguous. Ambiguous is when something is vague and undiscernible. And you can't really figure out what it means, whether it's good or bad or true or false. So if I said to you guys, if you guys asked me if you had homework and I said, well, homework, and then ended class like that, you guys wouldn't really be sure whether or not you had homework. I mean, I didn't assign any, but didn't exactly say no. I was ambiguous with my answer. And here, J.M. Barrie is breaking the fourth wall to be ambiguous with us about, like I said, Peter's lore. Lore is like the history or the past of a person, place, or thing. So the lore of this coffee mug, which is currently a water mug for Mr. Brooks, the lore of this mug is that it came from Goodwill. And before Goodwill, well, who knows? Maybe it belonged to another family. And before that, maybe another family. And before that, I think this is ceramic. I'm sure that it was just ceramic material. And before that, who knows, right? You'd have to ask Doc where all that comes from. But that would be the lore, the history of this cup. So J.M. Barrie breaks the fourth wall, but he doesn't do it by giving us full information. Even he, to make Peter more legendary, is a little unsure of exactly whether or not Peter was a true boy, at least at this part in the story. Let's continue. Are you sure mothers are like that? Yes, Peter said. So this was the truth about mothers, the toads. Still, it is best to be careful, and no one knows so quickly as a child when he should give in. Wendy, let us go home, cried John and Michael together. Yes, she said, clutching them. Not tonight, asked the Lost Boys, bewildered. They knew in what they called their hearts that one can get on quite well without a mother, and that it is only the mothers who think you can. At once, Wendy replied resolutely, for the horrible thought had come to her. Perhaps Mother is in half mourning by this time. This dread made her forgetful of what must be Peter's feelings, and she said to him rather sharply, Peter, will you make the necessary arrangements? If you wish it, he replied, as coolly as if she had asked him to pass the nuts. Not so much as a sorry to lose you between them. If she did not mind the parting, he was going to show her, was Peter, that neither did he. But of course he cared very much, and he was so full of wrath against grown-ups who as usual were spoiling everything, that as soon as he got inside his tree, he breathed intentionally quick, short breaths at the rate of about 5 to a second. So he was going... He did this because there is a saying in the Neverland that every time you breathe, a grown-up dies, and Peter was killing them off vindictively, as fast as possible. Then, having given the necessary instructions to the Redskins, he returned to the home, where an unworthy scene had been enacted in his absence. Panic-stricken at the thought of losing Wendy, the Lost Boys had advanced upon her threateningly. It will be worse than before she came, they cried. We shan't let her go. Let's keep her prisoner. Aye, chain her up. In her extremity, an instinct told her to which of them to turn. Toodles, she cried, I appeal to you. Was it not strange? She appealed to Toodles, quite the silliest one. Grandly, however, did Toodles respond, but at one moment he dropped his silliness and spoke with dignity. I am just Toodles, he said, and nobody minds me. But the first who does not behave to Wendy like an English gentleman, I will blood him severely. So Toodles is sticking up for Wendy. He drew back his hanger, and for that instant his sun was at noon. The others held back uneasily. Then Peter returned, and they saw at once that they would get no support from him. He would keep no girl in the Neverland against her will. That's very good of Peter. Wendy, he said, striding up and down, I have asked the Redskins to guide you through the wood, as flying tire as you sow. Thank you, Peter. Then, he continued in the short, sharp voice of one accustomed to be obeyed, Tinkerbell will take you across the sea. Wake her, Nibs. Nibs had to knock twice before he got an answer, though Tink had really been sitting up in bed listening for quite some time. Who are you? How dare you? Go away, she cried. You are to get up, Tink, Nibs called, and take Wendy on a journey. Of course, Tink had been delighted to hear that Wendy was going, but she was jolly well determined not to be her courier. That means her travel buddy or her guide. And she said so in still more offensive language. Then she pretended to be asleep again. She says she won't, Nibs exclaimed, aghast in such insubordination, whereupon Peter went sternly toward the young lady's chamber. Tink, he rapped out, if you don't get up and dress at once, I will open the curtains, and then we shall all see you in your negligee. This made her leap to the floor. Who said I wasn't getting up? She cried. In the meantime, the boys were gazing very forlornly at Wendy, now equipped with John and Michael for the journey. By this time they were dejected, not merely because they were about to lose her, but also because they felt that she was going off to something nice, to which they had not been invited. Novelty was beckoning to them as usual. Crediting them with a nobler feeling, Wendy melted. Dear ones, she said, if you will all come with me, I feel almost sure I can get my father and mother to adopt you. The invitation was meant specially for Peter, but each of the boys was thinking exclusively of himself, and at once they jumped with joy. But won't they think us rather a handful? Nibs asked in the middle of his jump. Oh no, said Wendy, rapidly thinking it out. It will only mean having a few beds in the drawing room. They can be hidden behind the screens on First Thursdays. Peter, can we go? They all cried imploringly. They took it for granted that if they went, he would also go. But really, they scarcely cared. Thus children are ever ready when novelty knocks to desert their dearest ones. All right, Peter replied with a bitter smile, and immediately they rushed off to get their things. And now, Peter, Wendy said, thinking she had put everything right, I'm going to give you your medicine before you go. She loved to give them medicine, and undoubtedly gave them too much. Of course, it was only water, but it was out of a bottle, and she always shook the bottle and counted the drops, which gave it a certain medicinal quality. On this occasion, however, she did not give Peter his portion, for just as she had prepared it, she saw a look on his face that made her heart sink. Get your things, Peter, she cried, shaking. No, he answered, pretending indifference. I am not going with you, Wendy. Yes, Peter. No. To show that her departure would leave him unmoved, he skipped up and down the room, playing gaily on his heartless pipes. She had to run about after him, though it was rather undignified. To find your mother, she coaxed. Now, if Peter had ever quite had a mother, he no longer missed her. He could do very well without one. He had thought them out and remembered only their bad points. No, he told Wendy decisively. Perhaps she would say I was old, and I would just want to be a little boy and have fun. But Peter, no. And so the others had to be told. Peter isn't coming. Peter not coming? They gazed blankly at him, their sticks over their backs, and on each stick a bundle. Their first thought was that if Peter was not going, he had probably changed his mind about letting them go. But he was far too proud for that. If you find your mothers, he said darkly, I hope you'll like them. The awful cynicism of this made an uncomfortable impression, and most of the Lost Boys began to look rather doubtful. After all, their faces said, were they not noodles to want to go? Now then, cried Peter, no fuss, no blubbering. Goodbye, Wendy. And he held out his hand cheerily, quite as if they must really go now, for he had something important to do. She had to take his hand, and there was no indication that he would prefer a thimble. You will remember about changing your flannels, Peter, she said, lingering over him. She was always so particular about their flannels. Yes, he said. And you will take your medicine? Yes, he said. That seemed to be everything, and an awkward pause followed. Peter, however, was not the kind that breaks down before other people. Are you ready, Tinkerbell? He called out. Aye, aye. Then lead the way. Tink darted up to the nearest tree, but no one followed her, for it was at this moment that the pirates made their dreadful attack upon the Redskins. Above, where all had been so still, the air was rent with shrieks and the clash of steel. Below, there was a dead silence. Mouths opened and remained open. Wendy fell on her knees, but her arms were extended toward Peter. All arms were extended to him, as if suddenly blown in his direction. They were beseeching him mutely not to desert them. As for Peter, he seized his sword, the same he thought he had slain Barbecue with, and the lust of battle was in his eye. Okay, that's the end of chapter 11. So guys, Wendy and the boys were about to get out of Neverland and go back home. Unfortunately, they were stopped. We are going to stop reading there, and the homework's a little different this week. I'm actually not going to have you do any writing, since it is the last week of academic work, and we have about a third, little less than a third, maybe a fifth left of the book. I would love if you guys would do a little reading for homework. So I'm going to assign you chapters 12, 13, and 14 for homework. Okay, so you are to read chapters 12, 13, and 14. You don't have any writing to do on it. And then when we have our next video, which will be the last academic video, we'll read chapter 15 and 16 together. And then I'll leave chapter 17 to you guys to finish on your own. Okay? And I'll talk a little about chapter 17 in the video, okay? I won't spoil the ending, but I'll definitely allude to some of the things that I want to be gained from it. So this reading will be your second to last assignment. On Thursday, when you see your next video, that will be your actual last assignment, and that'll be a brief 3-paragraph essay about some theme in the book. So I'm letting you know that one now. If you want to start on that homework early, you can, okay? The homework again on Thursday is going to be a 3-paragraph essay. Each paragraph should have no fewer than 5 sentences in it. And this is going to stand as your end of the year essay. You should focus on a theme, okay? I know we don't have time to go over all of the different proper ways to write an essay, as we would in class. It would take several hours, but we went over them in the beginning of the year. And whatever parts you remember, like a thesis statement, topic sentences, good transitions, quote integration, those sort of things, then I expect you guys to implement those as best you can, okay? So that's not this week's homework. That's not today's homework. That's going to be Thursday's homework. But again, you can get started on that if you want. Today's homework is just for you to read chapter 12, 13, and 14. Okay, 12, 13, and 14. Okay. So, with all that said, I hope you guys have a wonderful day. Come to my Zoom hours for the rest of the week. They're every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8:30 to 9 o'clock a.m. and 2 to 2:30 p.m. in the afternoon. And yeah, we've had a really good semester. I'm really proud of you guys for all the work you've put in. So we're almost done here. Go ahead and read those chapters. And if you have any questions, again, come to the Zoom calls or email me. All right, guys. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll talk to you soon. See ya.